Rex Patrick, Independent Senator for South Australia. Welcome back on Flow.
G'day, Ricky. Always a pleasure to come on.
Now, let's look at this fuel issue. You've got an interesting strategy calling for the federal government to do something to help our drivers who are feeling the pain at the petrol pumps.
Yeah, look, we've got families that are hurting. We've got small businesses that are hurting. We've got fuel prices approaching $2 a litre. In fact, today in Lee Creek, it's $2.01. This is harmful to people. It's also inflationary. We need to bring in an emergency measure over the next year or so to halve the fuel excise. That's basically giving relief on 23 cents in the litre. And we need to freeze the index that would normally occur twice a year.
All right, I can't do the math quickly in my head. Maybe you have. What would that save the average family, maybe per annum or per month, if they were paying 23 cents a litre less in fuel excise?
Well, what we'd see is about $775 that is now being paid, having that halved in terms of fuel excise. So that's a reasonable saving, and particularly for the battlers, particularly for the people in regions where the prices tend to be higher.
And the federal government may well say, and we have asked Treasurer Josh Frydenberg for a response at the time we've spoken to you, we haven't had one yet, but they may well say, well, there's this hypothecation argument that the fuel excise they collect is used to maintain our roads. Where should the government find the additional revenue to look for the payments on the providing for the roads?
Well, the legal situation is that fuel excise goes into consolidated revenue. Look, the government has a $16 billion secret war chest, unannounced programs that they're going to use for pork barrelling throughout the election. That is, they are going to spend money on either areas or groups that buys them votes. So there's plenty of money available, and we need to target this right across Australia, particularly for battlers, people who are doing it tough. Petrol prices hurt everyone. The fact is you can't avoid driving to work. You can't avoid driving the kids to school or to the hospital. All of those sorts of costs are non-discretionary, and we have to give some relief. We've got a high cost of living, and no one is paying attention to it.
Is the excise calculated on the Bowser price, or is it sort of I'm just wondering, if the price keeps climbing based on crude oil prices, is that excise going to get more and more and there's a windfall for the federal government?
Well, it might create a windfall, but it hurts the Australian economy. And look, I'm actually getting the PBO to do exact costings on this. This will cost the bottom line for the budget somewhere between $6 and $9 billion. But as I said, we've got a pork barrelling war chest that the government will use, and I'm not into people using money to buy votes. I think that's just an awful thing to do. It's a form of corruption. We've got to look more broadly at everyone right across the economy being looked after.
Well, those oil prices and Bowser prices are being driven partly, if not largely, by concerns about the Ukraine-Russia crisis. You've got a view that maybe there should be some sin binnings happening with diplomats.
Yeah, look, there's no question in my mind that there's a very serious situation going on in Europe. In fact, we've seen the announcement over the last 24 hours that two of the countries that are in the eastern part of the Ukraine that are sympathetic to the Russians have and had previously declared independence. The Russians have basically now recognised that independence and are sending in what they call peacekeeping troops. Huge forces built up at the border. We have in Australia the ability to sanction, using newer legislation that was brought in last year to sanction individuals, to sanction entities. The last thing we want to do is have sanctions being put on as the bombs are dropping on Kiev. We've got to act firmly in relation to this. There's no question there's a level of aggression, and if the Russians cross the border into Ukraine, then I think we should be expelling the Russian ambassador.
And then the Chinese government, it looks like the Prime Minister's been exchanging maybe some blows in the state media with the Chinese about this shining of a laser towards an Australian aircraft. The Chinese deny, or they say that maybe they were provoked. Do you know more about this incident, and what's your view on what should happen diplomatically?
Well, these are the sorts of things that do happen from time to time. This is very unusual for an Australian aircraft to be lit up with a laser, and these lasers can actually bring an aircraft down, so it's quite a serious matter in and around Australian waters. It's an act of intimidation. And look, I must say, congratulations to the professionalism of the Royal Australian Air Force, captain of the aircraft and the tactical officer on the aircraft for maintaining their professionalism and not escalating this. But it is a very serious matter. And look, I think what it reminds us of, we've just seen the cancellation of our future submarine project. We've got a government that's promising a future submarine in 2040 that will have long range to be able to get to the South China Sea in circumstances where we are being visited on a regular basis now by Chinese vessels in the Arafura Sea, the Coral Sea, the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, this is getting serious. But in relation to the attack that occurred or the intimidation that's occurred, I think it's appropriate for us to again look to using diplomatic tools, and that is to expel the defence attaché from the Chinese embassy in Canberra, and in my view, a number of people from the embassy or from the consulate here in Jocelyn. We've got to say to the Chinese, that is not acceptable conduct. This is dangerous conduct, and it's completely unnecessary.
Forgive me, I haven't kept up with the latest military technology. Are we talking about a laser like police complain about someone shining one into the eyes of helicopter pilots, or is it actually some sort of weapon that does damage to a craft?
We now have lasers on military vessels that are powerful enough to burn through the skin of an aircraft and potentially take out critical systems. The normal situation with these sorts of things is there would have been a radar tracking the aircraft. It can do all of the measurement of speed and range of the aircraft. So this is quite a different thing where someone's lit up a target with a laser. Completely unnecessary and dangerous.
Now, just lastly, talking national security, it is always important and in the national interest, but is the federal government, the Morrison government, politicising national security, talking about Anthony Albanese being the preferred winner in the federal election race by the Chinese government?
Well, I think this is most unhelpful. I think Australians ought to look to Mr. Burgess, the head of ASIO, and what he said, and even Dennis Richardson, former head of the Defence Department, former US ambassador, both saying this is unhelpful. You're politicising national security, again, for political purposes, and it's most unhelpful. The Prime Minister ought to be focusing on the preparedness of our defence forces to deal with situations like we've had this week in relation to Chinese vessels. Again, we've got Chinese vessels visiting our waters right now, and Mr. Morrison has a plan in place that gets us future submarines in 2040. That's basically 18 years too late.
Well, Senator Rex Patrick, thank you for your input there. Much appreciated, and always good to have you on Flow.
Thanks very much, Ricky.